I will never forget the very first Dr. Joe Dispenza progressive workshop I ever went to. It was 2 days. It was in 2017. And he was talking about how when you start to change, there's going to be a lot of chaos happening in your life because you're disconnecting from the old self. And he said, when this starts happening, and I'll never forget this moment, he said, "Hey, this is Em Hollis, and welcome to the messy truth of transformation, where it's okay to be magical and messy. This isn't your typical personal growth podcast. Around here, we talk about the real stuff, the raw, the honest, the shadow work, the spirals, the breakthroughs, and the beautiful chaos of becoming who you were always meant to be. If you've ever felt alone on your healing and growth journey, or you wondered why it feels hard even when you're doing the work, you're not crazy, and you're definitely not alone. Let's dive into the messy truth of what it actually takes to transform your life." We are back for yet another episode. I am here once again. You know, I said it in the first episode. I don't know what it is. I'm sure there's some explanation in the recesses of my subconscious mind and some trauma that occurred. But as soon as that camera says 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, record, it's like this just tension arises and fear and insecurity and all these things arise. And I'm just sharing this because this podcast is all about authenticity and realness and the messy truth. And the messy truth is that I don't have this all down yet. Maybe at some point I will. It's sort of like I've been helping my husband in his job. He was a commercial contractor for 35 years. And he ended up selling his company as he was going through his divorce. And for the remaining 3 years after that, or for the following 3 years after that, he went through sort of this dark night of the soul. And by the way, I will be having him come on and I will be interviewing his messy truth of transformation as he let go of that business, which was basically his baby. And so he went through this time period where he just had this really long dark night of the soul and really came up against everything that had been hidden underneath the surface, but what he was unaware of, as we all are, because he had distractions. And so about 6 months ago, he decided to start a new company with a friend of ours that actually had taken one of our courses. And this guy lived in Boise. So we're like, you know what, let's go to Boise and let's really give this a shot. And he did. And he is back I don't even want to say back. He's like rebirthed into something that he once had so much love for. And so with that, he has been asking me to help him with mudding and taping on the job. And what I remembered is that learning something new freaking sucks. Like, let's just say that is a messy truth, because when you go to do something, especially, I'm totally not trying to toot my own horn, but I typically can pick things up very quickly. Like, it's just, I don't know, a skill set that I have. When I learn something, I usually can pick it up very quickly. I can get good at it very fast and I can apply it really quick. It's why I've always loved transformation, because transformation happens when you can actually apply something. But I've been reminded of how frustrating it is in the struggle phase, like when you're actually learning something new, because my mind wants my body to do something. It's like learning to ride a bike or learning to ski, but your body's not doing it and you want to give up so bad. But I haven't given up. In fact, now I'm to the point where, like, okay, now I want to prove to myself that I can really good at mudding and taping, because this isn't like I'm just practicing at home. This is for commercial businesses. And so I have to like get good pretty quickly. And so I sort of feel the same way with this podcast. It's like, yes, I've done other things before, but nothing like this. I'm sort of leaping into something I've never done before. And so I'm just learning the things about podcasting, and it's just the struggle phase, and it's uncomfortable, but I know that I've learned enough, I hope, by this point in my own journey for the last 10 years, that if you stick with it, usually it pays off. So I'm going to stick with it. I'm here. I'm showing up to do another episode. And today, what we're going to be diving into is the messy truth of losing people when you embark on a journey of transformation and change. And what I really want to start with is, number one, this aspect of change and transformation is inevitable. So if you are in the midst of this season of your life where you are actively in a change and transformation stage, and you can see people that you're sort of starting to lose in your life, like loved ones, friends, family members, and you're wondering what to do or is this normal? First thing I want to tell you is it's totally normal. It is an absolute that this will happen when you go to change yourself and when you go to transform some aspect of your life. And so I just want to say that first, that this stage is inevitable. Everybody goes through this, and it doesn't matter, as have said before, what kind of change or transformation you're making in your life, this is going to happen. So whether you decide you want to quit smoking, whether you decide you want to lose weight, whether you decide you want to quit your job and start something new, whether you decide that I just need an internal change, like I'm having a spiritual awakening and I need to change myself and I need to change my life, this is going to be an inevitable part of that process. And so if you're going through this, once again, the whole point of this journey together in the messy truth is that you're not alone in this. And hopefully, with what I share today, it will help you navigate that process with a little bit more grace, a little bit more ease, a little bit more humility, and a little bit love for yourself and the people that you're losing. And so I'll start off by sharing my own personal experience of losing people on a growth journey, on a spiritual expansion journey. And I want to start that with telling you that I literally would listen to podcasts or YouTube videos early on in my journey of exactly this. Like I would have listened to myself 9 years ago saying the same thing. So I was listening, when I sort of had my spiritual awakening, started reading a book, You Are the Placebo by Dr. Joe Dispenza. And then that opened up this whole world of personal development and spiritual growth, spirituality to me. And so I started listening to all the really big names like Rachel Hollis, Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, all sorts of people in this space, Deepak Chopra, Eckhart Tolle, like all of them. And I remember distinctly listening to, because that's what I would do in the morning, like getting ready for work or even on the weekends. Like I would always start my morning off with listening to some kind of inspirational something on YouTube. And I remember listening to Tony Robbins quite often, and he would talk about not just him, but I would listen to like other, like those 30-minute, 15-minute motivational videos on YouTube. And they would often talk about the people in your life when you really start to change and transform your life. The people that will show the most resistance are actually the ones that you love the most. Like I would hear that and be like, I don't quite understand that. But they would talk about it often. Like you're going to come up against people that you love in your life pushing against your change and transformation, your friends, your family, and that's going to be the hardest part to navigate. And so I knew that because I was seeing it play out in my life in my marriage at the time. I was married to my ex-husband. And as I started embarking on this journey and I started meditating and I started really paying attention to my habits and my thoughts and my actions, and I started behaving really differently. For instance, when we would fight, which we would often, I started like just walking away and not fighting. And that was like, he didn't know what to do with himself. Like it really was like a shock. And it was almost like I could sense this, like his need to want me to keep fighting, and totally unconscious on his part, right? And so I started noticing that with my ex-husband. It was like the more that I dove down to this path, the more he really did not like it. And at the time, my mom had moved to the same city, the same little town that I was living in. And so she was sort of the person that I was like exchanging all this information with and doing it alongside. So I had like a study buddy in my mom, and we talked about this stuff, and she was actively doing it and I was actively doing it. And so I did have one person in my life that was really supporting me through this process. Now, this was 10 years ago. And honestly, in the last 10 years, just even meditation and manifestation and law of attraction is like so mainstream now. It blows my mind. But 10 years ago, and just, I can't believe how just a 10-year block of time can change that much. But 10 years ago, it was weird. It was crazy. Like even meditating, I was embarrassed to tell my family members at the time. I didn't have a lot of friends, but I was even embarrassed to tell like my in-laws or my just closer family. I was embarrassed to tell them I was meditating, which seems so bizarre to me now, but it was just such a weird thing. And so it wasn't like now it's like you watch Love is Blind, and most of them, like half of them are talking about, yeah, I'm really spiritual and I believe in personal development and growth. And I'm like, oh my gosh, even my daughter tells me, like, she's like, they even talk about this stuff in school now, mom. Like, people would make fun of you. She sort of gets a little like sour. Like, they would make fun of you for doing all this 9, 10 years ago. And now they're talking about it at school. Like, come on. So at that point, it wasn't as mainstream as it was. And of course, I am the type that when something resonates, I dive headfirst in. Like, I don't tiptoe. I go all the way in. And that's what I did. And thank God I did, because it's what allowed me to create the life that I have now. Had I just like sort of tiptoed, I think that my analytical mind would have taken over and I would have let everyone else's opinion taken over. But luckily, I was at a place in my life that I was miserable enough that I knew something had to change. And so I was watching this play out with my ex-husband, how it was sort of like as soon as I started this journey, I could see us. I mean, we never had a very healthy or functional marriage, but I could see it like even more so. For those of you that can't see on YouTube, my hands are like separating. I could see us just falling more and more apart. Felt like I was becoming somebody else, and he just was not comfortable at all with that version of me that I was becoming. Fast forward a year later, and I go to an advanced meditation retreat. I have an experience there that fundamentally changed me. And so when something like this happens, when you go and have an experience, whether it's at a retreat, whether it's with some kind of psychedelic, whether it's just something that happens to you in your life that fundamentally shifts you so much, it's like you can never go back to who you used to be. You just can't. And this can happen even in like traumatic events, right? Like some experience happens that's so intense that it fundamentally shifts who you are as a person. And the really challenging and difficult thing is you can try to explain that to people in your life, but they will never, ever, ever fully understand or grasp it until they've had an experience like that. And this is what makes it so challenging and tricky to navigate. When you start going through the process of transformation and change, and you have these sort of profound experiences, you can't explain it in words. And yet you are completely different. And so when I went to that advanced meditation retreat and I had an experience that fundamentally shifted me, in fact, I'll add here, I had a lot of support in a Facebook group I was part of at the time. And there was one woman, an older woman, that was really sort of like mentoring me and helping me through this really challenging part of my life and wanting to change so desperately, but knowing, number one, my husband hated it. Everybody else in my life didn't really like it, except for my mom. She was my only really support system to continue on this. And so that was really hard, especially, might I add, I had been a chronic people pleaser my whole life. And so not only did I sense the like uncomfortability in those around me that could tell I was changing, they knew for sure I was changing. But being a chronic people pleaser was like added just so much fuel to the fire, because I was like, I hate disappointing people, or I hate people being upset with me, or I hate people being mad at me. And I knew I was coming up against that every single day, literally. And so embarking on this meditation retreat, that woman that's sort of been helping me, I will never forget this. I mean, holy moly, did she not like have a vision of the future? But she was like, I remember her messaging me and saying, Emily, your life will forever be changed after this retreat. Like there will be a line in the sand of like your life pre-retreat and your life post-retreat. And that is exactly what happened. At that retreat, I had my first profound, mystical, energetic experience. I don't even like to call it mystical because it was somatic. It was physical. It was every cell in my body felt like it was being electrocuted. There's not really words, but those are the closest words I can use to explain what happened. Was my entire body was being electrocuted with light. As freaking crazy and wild as that sounds, I would have never guessed that would happen to me the moment before it happened. I just didn't think. I'd heard stories of these things happening to people, but I just never thought it would happen to me. And it did. And it's like it reorganized my brain and body, and I became a new person. I mean, I was already slowly starting to do that, but after this moment, for a year before that, after this moment, it's like everything shifted. When I came home from that event, I came home on a Monday morning, flew home on a Monday morning, and I knew I could not stay in my marriage. Like 100%, had been doubts. There'd been doubts really the whole 10 years because I knew, like I said, it wasn't a very healthy relationship. But this was like, uh, it would be the most unloved. After what I've experienced, the amount of love that I experienced, there's no way I could go back to, I just couldn't. Like there's just was no way. And that Monday, I sat my husband at the time down and said, I'm leaving. And I really didn't say much more than that because I couldn't really even find the words. I just said, and I don't think it came as a surprise to him, especially because 3 months before I said, okay, like I'm going to leave if things don't change. And so it wasn't like it was like shocking to him. He knew this was sort of coming. He could see me really changing. And so I left that night and, I never went back. And there's one thing that I always say when we're navigating leaving relationships or losing people in your life when you're going through change or transformation, and that is to leave from love. And so after I left that marriage, I went and stayed with my mom. I put myself through pain pill withdrawal, cold turkey. And I started a coaching business, like a lot of really major things. And a couple weeks later, I fell in love with the love of my life, my soulmate. And so it was like some major, major changes. And when that happened, and Scott and I decided that we wanted to choose life together instead of apart, we both pretty much lost everyone in our lives. I mean, pretty much everyone in his life and everyone in my life, he had left his marriage as well. It wasn't like we were leaving our marriages for each other. We left our marriages and then, very quickly after that, I will say, pretty much found each other. And there was no dating. There was no like, oh, we're in like the bliss chemicals of being in love. It was just like it always was. It just always was. There was just a knowing in each other. There was no trying to impress each other. There was no fear that we wouldn't be together. It just was, oh, we found each other again in this life. We've done this many, many times in other lives, and we found each other again. And when that happened, we lost pretty much all our family and friends pretty quickly. And him watching me, lose people, those closest to me, and me watching him lose people, those closest to him, and then watching the very few that actually did like still support us and did see something in what we were doing that they believed in and they felt that was real was so challenging to navigate. And I truly believe the only way that we got through that was because we had each other. It was sort of like us against the world, and we had each other to sort of fall back on. And it was, it was hard in a lot of moments, especially those that you sort of think are going to be there with you no matter what. Like no matter what you do, you'll have their support. And so to watch that unravel so quickly and so intensely was a really hard part in our life. Now, there's some things I want to say about this that I wouldn't have said probably 5 years ago, but because of my own growth journey and hopefully some wisdom I've gained in the process, I can now look back and go, I completely understand why those people, everyone in our life thought we had lost our mind. Like I totally get that. I mean, looking back, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, I changed so rapidly and not really, in a year period, I was like incrementally changing. But then after that retreat, it was so sudden. It was like such massive changes, and people could feel that I was not that person that I had used to be. And so I totally understand why everyone was like, you're absolutely nuts. Either you've joined a cult or you've lost your mind. I had a restraining order, but if I'm telling the messy, authentic truth, I had a restraining order put on me from my first ex-husband against me with my son. So I remember coming to visit and I actually couldn't even see my son because there was a restraining order because his dad thought I was like on drugs and in a cult and like was going to kidnap him. And, it was so bizarre because I'm watching all this happen and I'm like, for the first time in my life, I am not on drugs. I am the happiest I have ever been in my entire life. And I'm probably like the most secure in myself and secure in what I want and who I want to be in life. Like for the first time, I was the most healthy actually in my life. And so and I hadn't been, I'd pretty much been dysfunctional since I was 12, and I think I know what happens is, and this is the messy truth of navigating this process, is that people see you in a certain way, and we all need people to show up in our lives in a certain way. And everybody in my life was used to me showing up in a certain way, and they needed me to show up in that way for their own subconscious programs and patterns. And so when you start to change, what happens is a spotlight gets put on other people. And all of a sudden they're like, it's like a mirror gets turned on them, and it's really uncomfortable for them. I watched it. I watched the discomfort happen when I was, this sort of not the old version of myself around people I loved. I watched the discomfort of it in them. I watched like, who the hell is this person? And so when we're doing that, there's one thing that we have to understand is that people in our lives, that we play off of their patterns and programs as well. And so when you start to take that away, they're left with having to look at themselves. And it's really, really uncomfortable. I mean, you can see this with people who are alcoholics, and all of a sudden, they're hanging out with their friends and they decide that they want to quit drinking. You would think that the people around them would be like, good job. Yes, go for it. Quit drinking. Unfortunately, that's not usually the case. They're like, what the hell are you doing? Why are you changing? You think you're better than me? All of these things. When people quit smoking, when people decide to lose weight, like this doesn't just happen in the area of personal growth or spiritual expansion. It happens anytime someone's making a drastic change in their life, because the other people have a really hard time with seeing this new version of you, and they don't want that. Now, I'm not saying that in any way trying to blame the people in your life or say that they're bad people. Not at all. It is completely unconscious. This is all unconscious. They're not bad people. They're not trying to like secretly, make you not have a good life. It's nothing like that at all. It's just an unconscious process that we all go through, all of us. None of us are immune to this. So as Scott and I navigated pretty much losing most everyone in our life. And I also want to say that I had made a drastic decision to move across the country from my kids. And even though I knew in my heart of hearts it was the right thing to do, of course, other people in my life did not agree with that decision. But what I had learned up to that point is that I had listened to other people my entire life and put their opinion of how I should live ahead of my own. And what that did was put me in a life that I hated, that I knew that wasn't me, that I knew I was just like wearing a mask and keeping up with the Joneses. And I knew that's not the life I was supposed to be living. So at that point, I had enough of my own confidence and trust in myself at that point, because I hadn't let myself down for a year. I'd been getting up early in the mornings. I hated waking up early, and I'd been meditating, and I'd been sticking with these things that I'd never done that in my whole life. And so it was like I had gained enough trust in myself that I could trust myself and I could trust my intuition. And even though it looked like a crazy decision and people thought, oh my God, you're going to ruin your kids' life for forever, I understand that perspective, but it didn't mean that I was going to listen to it. I knew something deep inside me was saying, this is the right decision. As crazy as that sounded, there was just a knowing inside of me. And so between all these, sort of crazy decisions I was making to improve my life, people were looking at me with a lens of like, well, when she was 16, 15, 16, 17, she did a lot of really crazy things. And so they were sort of placing that projection onto me, like she's doing this again, understandably so. They didn't have the experience that I had. And then as we navigated this and we had each other to sort of figure out how to do that, when we started our coaching business and we started walking people through the same process and walking them through change and transformation, it's something that we had to help them navigate, because they too would start to change and they too would start to lose people in their life. Friends of like 30 years, I watched this happen. I mean, really long friendships, they would start to fall away. The other thing that is just so crazy, and I'm going to ask you when I share this with you, I'm going to ask you to zoom out your lens and first look at this perspective from a soul, like from a very, very zoomed out, from a higher soul perspective. And then we can zoom back in and look at it from a human perspective. But another sort of really common thing that we saw happen was when people would make some sort of big shift, like they left some aspect of their old self behind and they firmly moved into some new version of themselves, they actually would have people around them die, either people or animals die. Like I've seen it over and over and over again. It would blow my mind, but it was a pattern that I kept seeing of they made a big change and either, like I said, an animal or someone close to them that represented some aspect of the old self would die. I've seen this happen with the jewelry with me. Like I make some big shift. I can feel it internally. It's some big shift and I lose a piece of jewelry or it breaks. That's often the case. The piece of jewelry breaks. And instead of going, oh my God, I need to put this back together, or oh my God, I need to make this relationship work, or oh my God, this shouldn't have happened, I have learned in the process to honor that breaking and not try to put it back together. In fact, I will never forget the very first Dr. Joe Dispenza progressive workshop I ever went to. It was 2 days. It was in 2017. And he was talking about how when you start to change, there's going to be a lot of chaos happening in your life because you're disconnecting from the old self. And he said, when this starts happening, and I'll never forget this moment, he said, don't you dare try to put it back together. And that moment stuck into the recesses of my gray matter and was okay. I had been watching, like I said, enough stuff before that moment that had talked about this phenomena that happens. And so I was sort of prepared for it anyway. But that has always stuck with me, that when a piece of jewelry breaks or I lose somebody, because this doesn't just happen in the initial change. If you are committed to consistent growth in your life, this is going to happen over and over again. Because I always heard this saying, people are in your life for a reason, a season, or a lifetime. And so there may be people that come into your life for just a season and they contribute to your growth and you contribute to their growth, and you reach a point where that relationship just sort of ends. And I don't think it should ever be approached from this is a terrible thing, this marriage is ending, this friendship is I really, really, truly don't believe we should approach the ending of anything, even people dying, from that perspective. I mean, as Alan Watts says, death implies life and life implies death. And so if you have something new, inevitably that's going to end at some point. That may mean death, but it's going to end. And I think we are all so uncomfortable with change and things ending that it becomes this sort of huge trauma that then people want to hold on for dear life to anything and everything. They'll want to hold on to marriages that aren't even working. I mean, to me, it's just sort of crazy to say. And I'm talking about if you are committed and dedicated to growth in your life, which I think everybody should be. I think we're always becoming different versions of ourselves. But I think it's really crazy to sit there and say to each other, we for sure, no matter what, are going to be married for the rest of our lives, no matter what happens. I think that's just insane. Now, do I honor a commitment to each other? For sure. I honor the commitment to you and I'm going to show up for you every day, even through the hard times. And that's not even hard to do if you have a basis of love and respect for each other. It's for me, people say marriage or relationships is work. It's not work for me. It's the most enjoyable thing ever. Does that mean that there's not challenging times? No, but okay, I'm so there for the challenging times, but we change, things change, instances happen. And when you change, guess what? Sometimes relationships end. And I think if we can approach that from a place of sacredness and honor, it would change so much. And so, it hit me the other day with Scott losing pretty much all his friends and family when he left his marriage. And, there's a part of me that wants to write a letter to every single person in his as he would call his previous life, and try to explain to them and try to sort of fight for him and be like, you don't understand, you know? But I also know that everybody is on their own journey. Every single person is on their own journey. Mostly what I want to say, and maybe you're somebody that's listening to this and you've lost somebody because of a change or transformation. So you've been on the other end. And if that's you, what I want to tell you is that, as I said, when you have an experience that changes you to your core, fundamentally, you can never, ever, ever go back to life as usual. You just can't. And it is so impossible to try to explain that to somebody that has never experienced that. It's like trying to describe Hawaii. I'm saying Hawaii because I love Hawaii. It's like trying to describe Hawaii to somebody. Yes, it's amazing and beautiful. And them hearing what it's like as opposed to them actually being there. Like fundamentally, those are two totally different things. And so when you have a shift in your consciousness and when you have a big sort of growth spurt personally, you just can't go back to life as usual. And I understand that's really difficult for somebody. I've had to look at my life and go, wow, to be somebody that has been in my life for a long time would be very challenging because I am always constantly growing and always constantly changing. And to be honest, it's probably hard for people to keep up with. I'm like a whirlwind, you know, I'm just going all the time. And that's challenging for people. Like, whoa, slow down a minute. Let me catch up with you. And so I know for sure people close to me in my life, it's been challenging. And I have, I've had relationships sort of just slowly go away. I've had them abruptly go away over the last 10 years. I mean, obviously, that after that first year and after that workshop, that was like a big shift and just like losing a lot of people right away. But since then, over the last 7 years, yeah, I've had relationships with people that have gone away, and I think about them and ask, why did this happen? And then I also remember that this is part of the process. And if two people are in a marriage, and I remember hearing Tony Robbins say this, if two people are in a marriage and they're not both growing, it's pretty much inevitable that they will end up in divorce because the person that you think you're with is going to change. And can you be okay with that? Can you be ready for that? And I think that's, for now, the aspect that keeps Scott and I's relationship so strong is that we're both always growing and we're both always shedding, and we're not trying to project some older version of each other onto the new version. We understand, like, oh, you may have believed that or thought that a year ago, but you don't necessarily act that way or believe that way now, and always being willing to see each other in a new light. And again, both people have to be committed to this. What I also want to say is that don't ever shut the door that those relationships will be gone for forever. And so the next part of this, like I said, losing a lot of people in my life as I grew and as they really struggled and had a hard time with seeing this new version of me and really not loving it. Same with him as I watched him do that. Then we start coaching. We start seeing other people have to navigate this. Divorce, divorce is really, really common when you're talking about personal and spiritual growth. It is really common because a lot of times those marriages started out of like wounds, started from our trauma. For sure, my marriage did. And so if you start those relationships from a place of unconsciousness and from a place of trauma and from a place of your own wounds, as you start to heal and grow those, it's natural that that relationship is going to fall away because you don't have an energetic bond anymore. You don't have an energetic connection anymore because you've sort of healed those wounds. And so something that we used to say in our coaching programs all of the time was, it's not a question of should I stay or go when we're talking about marriage. It's not a question, should I stay or go? That should not be the forefront of your mind. Like, put that to the side. The only thing that you need to focus on is continuing to do your growth, is continuing to do your healing. And what will happen as a byproduct, inevitably for certain, this is the law of energy. as you grow and your frequency changes and you start to heal and you no longer are holding on to all those old wounds, your partner, only two things can happen. Your partner will either decide to rise with you and grow with you because they see what's happening and they don't want to lose you and they want to heal themselves, or they will fall away. There is no other thing that can happen. And the hardest part is remembering that and continuing down the path regardless and honoring their journey along the way. For me in the beginning, I desperately wanted my husband at the time to change. Like, I have journal entry after journal entry of saying, like, if he would just do this work, if he would just change. And then slowly as time went on, I stopped using his name and I just started talking about like how I wanted my husband to show up. And it wasn't even like I was saying Sean, my husband anymore. I was just saying my husband, like, this is what I want. Just sort of let go needing it to be him to be the change. And it just started opening up to potential and possibility. And I wasn't even doing it like to find somebody new or necessarily to change him. I was doing it because I was trying to heal myself, because I was trying to fall in love with myself. And inevitably, that's exactly what happened. I fell completely in love with myself. And I never had that my entire life. And because of that, I met my ex-husband and I stayed with him because of my trauma, because of my wounds as a child. And in healing that and in loving myself, it was like, there's just no way that I could go back to that. And after that experience of feeling just an amount of love that you can't even put into words. I say love to you right now, you're going to think of like a partner love or a love you have for your child. This is God love, universal love. Like, this is so beyond that. That's what I experienced moving through me. And you just would never go back. And so divorce happens a lot in this work, because as you start to heal and change, your partner either is forced to heal or change to stay with you or not, and that's fine. It's not up to you to say that they have to change. It's not your responsibility to change them. Of course, we have to change for ourselves and they have to come to that conclusion on their own, or it will never, ever, ever work. It's just like if you quit an addiction, you can't be doing it for somebody else. You have to do it for yourself or it won't last. And so, that happens often. And if you're in that place right now that's sort of navigating losing your friends that, you've had for forever, which inevitably, again, will happen, there's some tools and some wisdom, hopefully, that I can offer you that will help you and navigate them. And I wrote them down. There's really 4 things that I want to offer you today if you are that person going through this. And again, this can happen early on as you can start to change, but it will also happen as you continue to change. I mean, this will happen like with business. You may start to change and transform and realize this business isn't really in alignment with you anymore, or business partners, or again, friendships that may just be there for a season, not for a lifetime. And then there'll be those ones that are there for a lifetime. And so, like I said, there's 4 things that I really want to offer you today. I don't want to just sit here and share stories, although I do want to share stories because hopefully you will understand. I mean, I could tell you a million stories right now of people that we've coached over the last 6 years that have had this happen and have had to navigate this. And they know now, after going through it, that this just is a fundamental thing. And the last thing that actually just popped into my head that I wanted to share, because I think this could be really important for somebody that's listening and maybe in the same boat that I was. As I started to heal and grow, I knew that the relationship with my ex-husband was not in alignment with what I wanted. I knew that I was not healthy for him and he was definitely not healthy for me. I knew that that who I really was not the person he knew or wanted to be with. And I knew as long as I stayed in that marriage that I would be putting myself as somebody that I really wasn't. And that those 2 versions of ourselves, the version of him, the version of me, were actually really, really toxic and unhealthy for each other. However, I'll be totally authentic and raw and real with you. I was terrified to leave because I was so scared of what other people would think. Like, my mom had been divorced 4 times, and I saw the things that people would say about her growing up. And that was like deeply imprinted in my brain. And so I didn't want them to think I was like her and I was going to get divorced 4 times, because it was so traumatic hearing people like talk about her in negative ways as I was growing up. It was really traumatic because I loved my mom and I looked up to her. And I just was like, how could, they be saying these things about this person I love so much? And so that was really traumatic for me. And so I didn't want that to happen to my kids. And so I was afraid, so they would compare me to her. I was afraid they would say, okay, she's completely lost her mind. I even had a fear of like, I don't think I can do life without my ex-husband. Like I didn't think I could trust myself to actually navigate life, which is so sad when I say that out loud now. But I was so, so worried about what other people thought, that that's what kept me in that marriage, even though I knew deep inside I was not supposed to be in it. So I betrayed myself over and over and over again. And what finally shifted it was, for me, was what kind of an example am I leaving for my kids? Like, sure, I can tell them all of these things. I can tell them all of these concepts, but they're not going to hear me. They're going to see me. Our kids do not hear us. They see us. They watch our example. And I knew that if I continued to stay in a marriage that was like that, I would never be showing them what actual healthy, true love, like a healthy relationship, looks like. And that voice got loud enough that it got louder than the other voices of like, what are they going to think of me? And thank God to this day that one thing of like, I want to show my kids what living life on your terms looks like. I want to show them what it looks like to follow your own heart, even when people don't understand that. Even when they're like, no, I don't think you should do that. You can respect their opinion, you can respect the advice they're giving, but it doesn't mean you have to follow it, especially if those people are not living the life that you want to be living. Like, should be the most important question you ask yourself when you have people surrounding you that are like not actually supporting your growth. I want you to ask yourself, are they living the life you want to be living? Are they happy? Are they fulfilled? Are they successful? Are they making an impact? Like, are they living life on their terms? Are they really happy? And if they aren't, then okay, thank you. I respect your opinion, but I'm going to do it on my own. Like, I'm going to figure out my life for myself. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, you're the one that has to live the life. And so that was, like I said, that voice was loud enough to go, yeah, I need to do something different. And thank God I listened to that voice. Thank God, because I would not have the life that I have now. And my kids wouldn't get a chance to see what really, really deep, true, healthy, authentic love looks like. And because I didn't listen to that fear voice or what everyone else would think, it ended up being the best choice that I could have ever made for myself, for my kids, for anyone else that I made an impact in their life. And I say that now because if you are listening and you are a version of me 8 years ago, it's really important that you hear that, because I know this is a struggle that people have when they're growing and transforming, especially in their marriage. And I also want to say that for me, my marriage did not have a basis of love and respect for each other. So I always knew we really weren't healthy with each other. So it wasn't a case of like, well, we did have a foundation at one point of like deep love and respect for each other, and this was just like a hard thing we had to navigate. That was not my case. So if you are somebody that actually has that foundation, then yeah, it's something that you need to figure out and work through with your partner and see if they're willing to come up to your level and grow with you. And most likely they will if you have that foundation, but we never did. We never had that foundation, and I knew that. And so that's the difference between me and somebody else that may decide to stay. And there's many people that we've coached on this journey that their husbands are like, I'm going to support you in your journey, but it's not really for me. And I think that's great. I think if you have a partner that's like, you go, girl, like you go do your thing, and I'm right here to support you, it's just my thing. I think that's amazing. And I think that we should honor that. And that may just mean that you need to find other relationships to have those spiritual conversations with, because for sure, I understand that like when you're on a spiritual path, to try to talk to somebody that doesn't speak that language is really challenging. And you want people in your life that speak that language. It's really hard. Like for me, every single person in my life now sort of knows who I am. Like the last person that I really had to sort of come out of the spiritual closet with was my dad. And he accepted me and welcomed me with open arms. Like, so now I can be like woo woo and witchy and weird and not be ashamed or embarrassed or afraid to be that way in front of my dad. And so basically every single person in my life now knows that's who I am. Like, it's not something I hide or I'm embarrassed of or afraid to speak on. But that took, years and years and years of developing that trust within myself. And I had to go to the other extreme for a while of like, I am going to just, you know, I'm going to say it, speak it out loud to everyone, and everyone's going to hear me. And I don't care what they think. Like, I totally went to the other extreme for a while. And I would like to think that I've sort of made my way back to the middle now because it's an embodied thing. Like before, when you're like feeling like you need to preach it to the world and tell every single person, I get it. I was there, normal part of the process. A lot of times you're doing that because it's not actually embodied yet. It's who you want to become, but it's not actually who you are in your full body and mind. And the more that you become that, like deeply embedded in your body, the more it's just who you are. Like, you don't need to preach it from the rooftops. You don't need to tell everybody how spiritual you are. You just are. And then people start to respect and honor that in your life. And again, they're either there for it or they're not. And that is their choice. If you are that person, just understand that the only question should ever be, can I continue down this journey? And if you're committed to that, then everything else will fall in or out of place without you needing to decide anything or to do anything. Just stay on the path. So again, if that's you, there's 4 things that are really important that I want to share to help you navigate this messy truth. So number 1, I sort of already spoke to it, but that is leaving from love. And what I mean by that is, the day that I walked out of that house, the day I walked out of my marriage, the day that I left, I got into the car and I was driving to my mom's. And I swear to you, in the drive, I mean, there was a lot of, I don't even want to say fear, but it was some fear coming up to that moment of me having to actually say I'm leaving. But the moment I got in the car and left, I swear to you, it felt like a million pounds had lifted off my shoulders. I felt so free for the first time in my life. And that wasn't because I was running from that marriage. Had I left any moment before that, because I didn't have that experience of intense love at that workshop, I would have been running. I would have been running away as opposed to running towards. So if I had been running away, guess what would have happened? I would have just recreated that situation in my life again. And so when I say leave from love, what I mean is I had fallen so much in love with myself that there was no way that putting myself back into a marriage like that would be the most loving thing for me or for him. There just was no way. It wasn't like, oh my God, I need to hurry up and run away from this man or this marriage. It was, I am so filled with love that of course I'm going to walk out the door because that's the most loving thing that I can do. And I'm not going to be running away from him. I'm going to be running towards a vision of a future that I had, who I wanted to be and how I wanted my life to look like. I was running towards that. I wasn't running away from anything. So the first thing is leaving from love. So if you know that you need to leave a relationship behind because it's not serving you any longer, I invite you not to step out that door, or step away from that relationship until you're doing it from a place of complete and utter love for yourself. And if you have that complete and utter love for yourself, you're going to have that for the other person, which means you're not trying to shame them or make them a bad person or make them evil. You're having compassion for them and you're understanding they're on their journey as well. And I'm leaving because it's the most loving thing that I can do for myself right now. And if it's the most loving thing I can do for myself right now, it for sure will be the most loving thing you can do for that person. And it may just be the catalyst to what completely changes that person's life. You never know. You never know what stepping away from that relationship, what it may be the catalyst for in their own life. We think, oh my God, they're going to hate me or I'm going to hurt them or whatever. But if you're doing it from a place of love, you never have to worry about that. As long as it's truly authentically a place of alignment and love for yourself, that it could be the catalyst for them to change as well. So do not step away from a relationship that you're running from. Like, have it be from a place of certainty in who you are, in who you want to become, and the life that you want to live. Let it come from that super aligned, grounded, loving place. That's the first thing I want to share. The second thing took me a while to learn, and hopefully I've learned from it. I don't know that I'm still perfect at this. I don't know any of these I'm still perfect, but I'm navigating them in a much more humble way. And that leads me to number two, which is leaving with humility, which means honoring other people's journeys instead of making them wrong or bad. So I just mentioned this in the first one. But what that really means is, like, when you decide to walk away from a friendship or a business partnership or a marriage or some kind of close relationship, this can even happen with your kids, right? If you have adult kids and you just realize that it's not like a loving relationship and it's not very healthy and you have to leave that relationship, that may be the case as well. I've seen this happen. What I want you to understand is, again, they are on their own journey. They are looking through their lens. They are having their own experience. And so if we leave and we try to make them bad, or we try to make them wrong, or, we're doing that because we're trying to make ourselves feel better because we feel guilt about leaving. But if you leave from a complete place of love, you will not feel guilt for leaving because you'll know it's the most loving thing. And if you do that, you can honor them in the process. You can not shame them, not tell them how horrible they are, not call them a narcissist, not call them all the names. You can just leave and honor their journey. And that's it. Even if you're leaving a very toxic relationship. I did. I left a marriage that was very toxic. And when I left, I wasn't, telling the whole world about all our dirty laundry. I wasn't shouting it from the rooftops. I could have, and I didn't. I wasn't like, he is this terrible person. In fact, he's an amazing father. We may have had a terrible marriage. He may have been a shitty husband. I may have been a shitty wife, but he was a great father. And I wanted to honor those aspects of him. And so, I wasn't graceful when I left some of my relationships. I will say, one of them was the relationship with my mom. We'd been really close my whole life. And when I made these sort of major changes, we had some conversations and some disagreements, and it completely sort of severed the relationship. I mean, we'd still communicate, but it was not a relationship. And it took about 6 years for us to find our way back to each other, but not from who we were before, who we are now. And that's sort of the relationship that we've been building for the last probably 2 years, is who we are now, and like really getting to know each other now because she's grown and I've grown. And so if you can leave from humility and honor and understand they are a human being, they have their own paths. They have their own patterns. They have their own wounds. They have their own traumas. They have their own unconsciousness that they're playing out. They're not some evil person that's just trying to come after you. They're just trying to figure out their way through life. And most likely they're projecting onto you, you're projecting onto them. So if you can get grounded in love and then leave from love, what you're going to do is you're going to honor their journey too. And you're going to do it with humility. And then that sort of leads me into the third aspect, or the third thing that I wanted to share with you. If you're wondering, like, well, that seems really harsh to just put up boundaries and like just to not see the person. The example that I always like to give is, if you're an alcoholic and you decide, you know what, I want to change my life. I want to transform. I want to stop drinking. I want to be healthy of mind, body, spirit. And I really want to do this for myself. Sometimes in the spiritual lingo, it will be like, well, you need to learn how to have, elevated emotions and be happy no matter what environment you're in. Sure. Once you get to the level of mastery, that should be the goal. However, if you are not at the level of mastery, which most of us aren't, we're just sort of flopping around, figuring our way out in a very messy truth of transformation, right? It's very messy and nonlinear. But if you decide you want to stop drinking, you're not going to go into a bar every day just to prove to yourself how you cannot drink while being around other alcoholics, while being in front of the opportunity to have a drink at any given moment. You're going to say, right now, I need to do some healing on myself. And while I do that healing and growth, I cannot put myself in that bar. I have to separate. The same thing goes for the people in your life. If you know that you want to make a big transformation and a big change, and going around certain people is like going into your own version of a bar, you may need to set up some boundaries and some space. That does not mean that's forever. That does not mean you're making that person wrong or shaming them. It means for your own health and love for yourself and commitment to your growth, you may need to take some space for a while. And then once you're able to sort of get down deep and dirty and heal the stuff that needs to be healed and transform and begin to walk into the version of yourself that you want to be, only then maybe you'll go into a bar. Maybe you may never go into a bar for the rest of your life, and that's okay. You may at some point go into a bar and be totally fine with it. You may go into the bar after years and go, oh no, there's still a part of me that wants to drink, better not go back in there, right? And so you just have to honor that part of it. And so that may mean saying, I need to take some space for a bit. Even in a marriage, I don't know that I'm ready to like totally throw in the towel in our marriage, but I do need to take some space for a while because, again, if you're an alcoholic deciding to quit drinking, you're not going to go into a bar every day to try to prove to yourself that you can do it. You're going to take space from that. So the same thing goes for this. And lastly, that leads into the fourth thing that I want to share, and that's really setting boundaries, but always leaving potential for that relationship to come back if and when it's ready. So I say this because this is what happened with a lot of people in my life. We lost the relationship and at this point they didn't get reunited, but I always say that may change tomorrow. That may change tomorrow. Some family members, I am not of the belief that just because people are family means you have to have a relationship with them for the rest of your life. I just don't believe that way. But I do believe in chosen family. I do believe, in fact, I think it's even harder for the people that you choose to have your family in your life to navigate that. It's one thing if it's like a family member and you're like, whatever, I'm stuck with them. But I think consciously choosing people to have in your life is a really powerful thing to do. And like I said, to always leave the door open. As I said, some people in my life never came back around, but there are some that did. And one of those is my mom, which is, I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful through all of those ups and downs that we could come to a place that we could restart a relationship and get to know these newer versions of each other, still holding on to the aspects that we loved about each other, but also just navigating the relationship as new people and what that looks like. And so I think always leaving the potential to sort of have that relationship be reunited is a great thing to have. Like not forcing it. I've seen that happen. I've seen people try to they've sort of left marriages or they've left friendships and they're like, they really want to try to make it work and they want that person to change. And that it usually never happens when that's the case. It usually only ever happens when you sort of like surrendered and went, if this relationships comes back, it will. And if it doesn't, I'm okay with that too. I send love to that person. I send love to myself, and I honor this moment that we have decided to part ways. And how can I grow from that and learn from that? And I think if you can follow those four things as you're navigating this, it's going to be so much, I don't want to say easier because it's still going to be challenging, but you're going to be able to navigate it a whole lot better. And if you are stuck, if you feel like you're stuck in a relationship right now that you just know is not serving you, again, I really just want you to think about what is the most loving thing. And that does not always mean that you stay no matter what. That is not always the most loving thing that you can do for you and the other person and the people around you. Sometimes the right thing to do is the hardest thing to do. And that is a lesson I've learned over and over and over again in my own journey. So with all of that being said, I would love to hear from you guys. Please leave a comment and let me know if this was helpful to you at all. Let me know if you've had to navigate this, like what that's been like for you. Let me know if you're in the midst of this right now and if these four things sort of contributed and added value to you to help you maybe have a clearer understanding or maybe have an aha moment. I would love to hear from you. I want this to be a conversation, not just me talking at you. So let me know in the comments. Give me some feedback. Let me know what you're navigating in your life, how you have navigated this. I would love to hear from you guys. So that is a wrap. The next episode, all wrapped up. There's so much more that I want to share with you. And I'm just excited that we're on this journey of the messy truth of transformation together. I'll see you guys next time. Hey guys, thanks for listening to another episode. If this episode resonated in any way, I would love for you to subscribe, leave a review, or share it with somebody who's in the thick of it too. If you want more behind the scenes, or you want tools to support you along your journey of messiness, come hang out with me over on Instagram at mhollis_thissage. But most importantly, just remember, the mess is part of the magic.